Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome once again to Career Expert Roundtable. I am Bill, the company's expert, and with me, as always, is Abby from the YouTube channel Life Work Balance. And we're here to talk to you about careers, job interviews, hiring, job search, all of that. How
Yes,
you doing today, Abby?
I'm doing well, and I'm hoping people get into the chat, send us questions, comments, things like that to help kind of further our discussion, just because we're here to answer your questions, whether it's job search related, interview related, once you get a job, how you might show up in the workforce type thing. So all of that are topics that we can cover. So if you've got questions, whether they're burning or they just like pop up for you, put them in the chat. We will do our best to address all of those over the next about hour and a half that we're spending together.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going out live on my YouTube channel, The Company's Expert. It's also going out on Abby's YouTube channel. You've got a couple of channels. I've got a couple of channels. It's going out live on all of them. So wherever you are, get in the chat. Let us know your questions, what you're struggling with, what you're wondering about, and we will do our best to answer your questions. Abby is a recruiter, and I am a hiring manager. So between the two of us, we can hopefully answer your question. Yeah, so we were going to talk about, I was wondering about something, and we were having a little bit of a chat before we went live about mock interviews and about filming yourself and
Yeah.
how a lot of people may be afraid to actually do those two things, which is kind of a shame. So I wanted to get into that with you, Abby. Is that what you're kind of seeing? People are shying away from doing these things?
Yes. Most people do not want to see or hear themselves from a recording. We sound different to ourselves, like speaking, than we actually do when we hear our audio. So it feels uncomfortable when we watch and listen to ourselves. But if you're truly wanting to prepare for an interview in the most effective way, recording yourself and then watching it back is step one to having a successful preparation. Now, as a career coach, I offer mock interviews where people can set up a session with me and I act as an interviewer and I record the session for them, give them some feedback and things like that. If for some reason they're not able to set up a session with me, then the next best thing is to record yourself, whether it's on your device, whether it is, on a private Zoom meeting where you record yourself that way. But if you can get a video and audio recording of yourself to then watch back, so you can not only observe your nonverbal body language, but also hear your responses, listen to the cadence, the tone of how you're speaking, and decide, does my story actually make sense? Is it clear? Is it concise? Or am I rambling? All of those things are great data to help you determine if you're going to be showing up in an interview more prepared or less prepared.
Yeah, you may notice something about yourself that you may not realize that you're doing. I imagine that would be the big advantage of doing this. Like, you think you're doing one thing, you think you're coming across a certain way, but then you watch yourself, you maybe realize, wait a minute, I'm leaving big gaps, like big pauses, and when I answer a question, and maybe I should try and work on that. I didn't realize I was doing that, or something like that.
Yes, well, and it can be something even, maybe I've worked with people who really talk with their hands, and that can get distracting. So if you have someone who's like big and boisterous and has all of these body movements.
Yeah, the big sort of hand movements there. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, people get
Some
distracted
people
by
some
that.
people talk with their hands. Sometimes some people talk with their hands in an extreme, alarming kind of way. Yeah, I've
Yes,
seen that before.
yes. Well, I worked with someone who she would wear a Fitbit or like a fitness watch. And all of the people who were doing like fitness challenges with her were like, it's not fair because you get movement just by sitting because you're moving your arms so much. So everyone's aware of those extra movements, even if they kind of joke about it. So whether it's a virtual interview or an in-person interview, that nonverbal body language really makes an impact. I think the nonverbal body language accounts for like over 90% of our communication. So if you have no facial expression, if you're not making eye contact, if you're not smiling, if you aren't moving at all and you're just completely still, all of those things can either add up towards your benefit or subtract from the impression that you're making. And people will make judgments about you. And so make sure that you're watching those body movements and your body language and see, is it helping you or is it hindering you?
Yeah, it's like the thing is interviewing. I did a poll question on my channel like in the last couple of days, and it was something like, what is the thing that you like the least or you dislike the most? I can't remember what it was, and like public speaking was one of the things in there. A lot of people chose that. I don't know if that won the poll, but you know, um, it's like this is a big thing, and interviewing is kind of an extension of that. You're not
Yeah.
speaking publicly to a large group. You might be speaking to one to a few people, but it's kind of the same thing. A lot of people have a fear of this, and the way you work on it, the way you overcome the fear and you get better is practice. Practice makes perfect. And filming yourself is one option. Another option is doing a pretend interview, a mock interview with somebody else. You could do it with a career coach. You could do it with a friend or a family member or anyone else. A lot of executives and stuff, they pay for this service from HR companies. So they'll sit down with a recruiter, and the recruiter will, do a pretend interview with them.
Yep.
And it's like a dual benefit. So number one, you get practice doing it. The more you rehearse, the more you answer the same question over and over and over again. If you keep doing these interviews, that helps you. Your answer gets better each time. The delivery is smoother, and you're less indecisive. You feel more confident. But also the added benefit is that you get feedback. People often ask, like, how do I get feedback? Nobody's giving me feedback when I go for a job interview. All I know is I didn't get it. I have no idea why. The way you get feedback is you do this kind of activity. You do pretend interviews with someone that's helping you, like a career coach or even like a friend or family member, and they can also give you feedback. Now, I don't know if a friend or family member, you may not trust their feedback
They might
100%,
not give you
depending.
really authentic, genuine feedback because they don't want to hurt your feelings,
Yeah.
or they're making like justifications or excuses in their mind. So it is always better to have someone who doesn't know you, who is willing to give you that critical, but also somewhat positive feedback to not only let you know what you could do better, but what you're doing well without the layer of wondering if what they're saying is 100% true.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I actually just had a mock interview with someone on Friday where this happened. So there were two pieces of feedback that I gave this person right away. When I do mock interviews, they're all virtual, so that through Zoom, I record them. And so it's, you could do an in-person mock interview with someone sitting across the table from you. This would be more of a, replicating a virtual interview. But I noticed that like their camera would go in and out of focus because they were standing up and they were moving while they were doing their mock interview with me, which then caused their camera to go completely blurry, but then refocus. And I, as the mock interviewer, got pretty distracted by that camera focusing and unfocusing.
Why would they be standing up? Is that like a common thing when you do like a mock interview or a video or something?
No, not necessarily, but I think they had a standing desk. So they had it raised up so they could stand and maybe like move around a little bit to feel more comfortable. And so I couldn't tell based off of, like I couldn't see a chair or anything like that, but I could tell that they were moving around. And so I told this person, I think you're standing. And based on your standing, you're moving a little bit, which is causing your camera to go in and out of focus. And if you do a virtual interview, that will be distracting for the interviewer. They will be wondering what you're doing. Are you moving? Is it the camera moving? There will be all these things that then distract from the success of your interview.
I think what we all want to know is at what point does standing and moving technically get reclassified as dancing? That's the big question.
Right. Well, and I think if you have a setup that doesn't distract from, or that movement doesn't distract from your interview, then it's perfectly fine. I might prefer to stand while I'm interviewing just because I maybe have enhanced blood flow, or maybe I'm just more comfortable that way. Like for whatever the reason, you can stand or sit. But I did recommend to this person, because your camera is doing this focusing and unfocusing thing, you should probably sit for your interview.
Yeah, that
so
makes
that you're
a lot
not
of sense.
accidentally causing this focus and unfocus. The other piece of or feedback that I gave this person was based off of their responses to the questions that I asked them. And many people aren't going to know if their response is sufficient enough, if it gives enough detail or information to the interviewers, things like that. This person in particular is moving industries. They're moving from private sector to public sector, so more government work, and they don't have any government experience. So one of the things that I noticed with 3 of the 8 to 10 questions that I asked this person was at the beginning of each of their responses, they said, well, I don't have any government experience. And they kept saying this over and over and over again. And they're going to be interviewing with government personnel who want some transferable skills for government. So this person consistently reminding the interviewers that they have no government experience is actually probably planting seeds and red flags for the interviewers that this person isn't the right fit for the job. They've been interviewing and looking for jobs for over a year. So this is probably, they're not trying to be deceitful. They're trying to be very honest with the interviewers by saying, I don't have government experience and here are my transferable skills. But you don't need to repeat that over and over and over again, because it just lets the interviewers know that I might not be the best fit. I don't have the experience you're looking for.
Yeah, that's a good lesson for everybody. We were talking about that kind of thing earlier. It's something that some people do. A lot of young people do. Rookie people that have never done a lot of job interviews will do. And we've talked about it before, where they say like, okay, look, full disclosure, and then they'll say something bad about themselves. I don't have a lot of experience with this. I have no experience in that. You're like leading with these negative points. You're giving them reasons why they wouldn't hire you, like right up front,
Yes.
So the thing is, I think, people's heart is in the right place. They're wanting to be honest. They're wanting to level with somebody. They don't want to be fake. They want to be authentic and all this kind of stuff. And that's very admirable. Yes. But the problem is that you're sort of introducing yourself. You're making a first impression. They don't know who you are. They're meeting you for the first time. And the first thing out of your mouth is, oh, I'm bad at this, or I don't have this and I don't have that, and it's like, okay, so that becomes sort of who you are to the other person. Yeah. Instead of being a blank slate, you could be like anybody. Now you're like, oh, you're not the person that has this and you're not the person that has that.
Right.
You're making a very bad first impression.
Yes.
And you get points for
not to hire you.
Yeah, you get points for the intention. It's a good intention, but the problem is, it's like when you consider the other person's perspective, you're shooting yourself in the foot. I just want to respond to a couple of questions. Joseph says, exactly. Preach on, brother Bill. Thanks, Joseph. You're awesome. Amaze says, that's right. I typically don't like hearing my own voice or mock interviews. Mm-hmm. However, I also understand it may be necessary to improve my interview chances. Yeah, I would say consider doing some of this. If you have people around, do it with other people if you can. If not, the next best thing I would say is recording yourself. I put it in that order.
Yep. Best case scenario, number one priority is try to do a mock interview with someone who doesn't know you and record that, whether it's virtual or in person. Then next best is to do a mock interview with someone you do know. And ideally you record that as well. And then the third best option is to record yourself by yourself. But the commonality between all three of those options is recording yourself. And, you could get a tripod and set your phone on it. If you have a camera of some sort, you can do that as well. But you want to record you so you can visually see your body language. And then you also want to have that audio option so that you can hear what your responses sound like to an outsider.
Recorded on Super 8. Anybody remember that format? That was like those when like people had film cameras at home, like to shoot like home, like family movies and stuff. And it was on films, like silent film. It was Super 8,
Yeah, well, and I'm going to reach over here. This is just like a simple phone tripod that extends really far. And, it's just something off of Amazon. And I record a bunch of stuff on here. Like we sing happy birthday as a family to the people whose, birthdays are coming up. So I use it for personal reasons, but then you can use it for professional reasons too, like conducting your own mock interview in person with someone. And so you don't have to get fancy with your technology. You probably all have phones of some sort that have a camera on it, just based off of the day and age we live in. It doesn't have to be the best quality. You're probably not going to share it with anyone. So give yourself that added boost of a chance by recording yourself and watching and listening to it back so that you can take in some of the data of how you present so that you can make the best first impression.
Okay, so if you don't have like the $10 for the Amazon tripod thing, you could always chew some gum, stick it to the back of your phone, stick it to the wall, and do it that way. Listen, the thing I want everyone to know is that a big fear I think that people have doing this, and somebody mentioned this, I think in the chat. Did someone just mention this? Like the fear of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
This is Alpizapal says, this reminds me of when I stumbled in job interviews and kept repeating myself out of lack of preparation. Yeah, preparation is key. Like practice makes perfect. Nobody's good at job interviews right out of the gate when you're young and
No.
you've never done one. You have to practice. It's like anything else.
And even if you've done hundreds of interviews and then you take a couple of months or even weeks off, it takes a bit to get back into the groove of interviewing. Just because it's such a, false kind of artificial environment, we're not used to doing that. And in most cases, we're not going to be in an interview setting. So practicing is what gets you prepared for that, even if it's been a while since you've.
Yeah, it's like learning. It's like learning a sport. I mean, you guys play sports. I play lots of sports. You can tell by my physique. Uh, Fishing, right? That's where you could take like a 3-hour nap and call it a sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like learning a sport. It's like learning a musical instrument. You don't just like see someone play this amazing thing on an instrument and then you just pick it up and you're instantly good, or you read a book about how to play the instrument, then you pick up the instrument, you're instantly good. You have to rehearse, you have to practice. Job interviewing is exactly the same way. You have to practice.
Yes.
And I mean, Abby, you can give me your take on this. My take is like a 2-phase kind of thing. First phase is like you work solo. You learn the answers to common questions. You revise maybe your accomplishments and like how to say them in a compact way if someone asks you, like in the STAR format or whatever. But you do kind of solo work. You try and memorize answers, figure out what you're going to say. Then the second phase is then you usually do it with somebody else where you simulate a real job interview. And now that you know like what you're supposed to say, let's see if you can perform. Let's put it all together. And while someone is staring at you, while somebody else kind of sets the pace and chooses the question and puts you on the spot, that's what the rehearsal phase is about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're talking about here with recording yourself or doing mock interviews.
Yes. And I would agree. And I think most people feel very comfortable with the individual preparation side of things. Then you get into the second step, which is the mock interviews or recording yourself. And people are like, oh, I've written my paragraph response to that. Like, I'm fine. But when you then hear it read by yourself, because that's probably what you're doing rather than memorizing it. Or
You go,
like that,
oh man, I'm an idiot. Yeah.
Doesn't sound as great.
Cringe.
So, yes. Yeah. Definitely record yourself, ideally. Do a mock interview with another person as that second phase of preparation. And give yourself a couple of days before an interview to do that so that you can have some time to digest some of the data you've gathered. You can get, that feedback and you can digest that as well. And then you can start to implement some changes intentionally before your interview actually occurs.
Absolutely. So Ram says, hey, back to Ram. So does Akash, if I'm saying that right. Alpine's pal says, is it okay to ask for a minute to think about a presented question? I don't think it's the end of the world, but you want to try and avoid that. It kind of signals you're not prepared.
Well, and I think that if you do that for every single response, then they're going to be going,
Yeah, that's a deal breaker, I think.
Yes. So I feel like I talk about this book in almost every live stream, which is the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the habits is to seek first to understand, then to be understood. And it goes into detail about how you can become a really good active listener. And that's the goal during an interview, is you want to actively listen for kind of the intention and like the core question that interviewers are getting to when they're asking you questions, because they might ask you a question that sounds like it's meaning for one thing, but it's actually intended to give them some insight into something else. So if you take a moment to just actively listen and then pause before responding, then you can likely give a very insightful question. If you are completely blindsided and you have no idea how to answer, then I think it's okay to say, something along the lines of like, that's a great question. I'm going to take a moment to think of an example where I've done this in the past, something like that, where you can give them a little bit of a, like, I'm going to take a moment, I'm going to think about this, and then you give them your response. But if you're quiet for like a minute, it starts to feel pretty uncomfortable for everyone in the room, whether it's a virtual room or an in-person room. So the least amount of times you do that, the better. But it's not going to ruin your chances completely if you do ask for a moment to gather your thoughts.
Yeah, and that could even include like repeating the question. So somebody says, "So tell me about your greatest weaknesses," and you go, okay, so tell me about your greatest weaknesses." Well, and then you kind of start, like you just repeat back the question that they asked you. That buys you a little bit of time. That makes sure you've understood the question.
Yep.
If you can't repeat the question because you can't remember what they said, then you can ask like, "So, you're wanting to know about my weaknesses?" Like you can ask a follow up question to them to make sure you've got it right what they're asking you.
Yep.
Stuff like that, and then all that gives you a little bit of time, and while you're thinking about what to say, or you're summoning up the memory location where you rehearsed what your answer was going to be, that kind of thing.
Well, I think that by repeating back the question, parroting it back or paraphrasing it back to the interviewer, that might even prompt them to give you more information. If
Yeah.
they're saying, yes, so I want to know, what are 3 things that you're wanting to improve rather than just tell me about your greatest weaknesses. So then you can say, okay, now I don't need to list off like all the things that are coming to mind for me. I just need to pick 3 things that I'm working to improve, let alone.
Oh, good, because I was going to give you an entire laundry list of all my weaknesses. That was just
Yep.
naturally what
We're
I was going to do.
self-deprecating. It's the
Yeah,
first thing that
exactly.
comes to mind for us. All the things we're
Alphabetical,
bad at.
chronological.
Mm-hmm.
Ram says, "How to remain calm in an interview. I am a kind of person who sweat like a waterfall with extreme heartbeat." Okay, but hopefully that's not like a health issue. But after 10 to 15 minutes, I guess, I became more comfortable, but it damages the initial presentation. Here's what I would say. Okay, so I'm wearing something called a Thompson tee, like an undershirt for men or for women. They make this product and similar products. What it is it's got like absorbent pads under the armpits and stuff. You can't see my armpits, not that you'd want to, but they're completely dry. Really cool for like teaching and stuff. It's the middle of summer, it's really everybody's sweating, and you can like lift your arms and be comfortable because under no circumstances will you get any kind of sweat stains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So there are products and things out there like special clothes, and it sounds silly, but these can help you. And I mean, if you're sensitive about like you got like all kinds of weird stains everywhere happening, like it can take a hit. Your confidence can obviously be affected if you're struggling with that kind of stuff. So they do have stuff like this. Look into that. The thing that I would recommend is something called a Thompson tee. Thompson, I think that's, I don't know if it, like Thompson and Thompson, I don't know if it has the H in it or not, but anyway, look into that if that's a particular issue that you're having. I've used these for years. It makes so that issue just goes away. You don't have to worry. You could have like little beads of perspiration on your forehead. I mean, you kind of just wipe that away,
Yeah.
whatever. But other than that, like that takes care of that general issue. So hopefully that helps. The other thing that will give you more confidence and make you less nervous is, once again, coming back to rehearsing, right?
Yeah.
You will feel more confident. You won't be quite as nervous, and then you'll do better.
Yes. And while you've been giving that advice, I've been putting some of my playlists in the chat. If you are not watching this on my channel, then you may not see those links come through. So if you're interested in those, you can check out the replay on my channel and see the chat replay come through. But I've got 2 playlists specifically on this topic, which is how to boost your interview confidence and then how to calm your nerves. And many times, practicing and preparing for an interview helps you feel more calm going in, but there's some other more physical things that you can do. If you know that you're, the kind of person who gets really amped up and your heart rate increases and you sweat a lot, then one of the things you might want to work on is that body regulation. So there's a technique called box breathing, and I'll find the link to it. There's if you just Google box breathing and how to do it, you can look into it. And it's essentially where you imagine and you visualize you're breathing in a box. So you inhale as you're going across the top of the box for 4 seconds. You hold for a count of 4. Then you exhale for a count of 4. And then you hold for a count of 4. And then you repeat. Doing that for just a couple of rotations visually around the box usually helps regulate your physical response to whatever stress you might be experiencing. The other physical thing that I recommend doing is there's a pressure point just right here in your hand, either side, whatever you feel most comfortable with. And if you squeeze that little, like, tissuey place between your thumb and your forefinger on either hand, there's a pressure point there. And that can help regulate your system as well. The great thing about that is you can do that during an interview if you're starting to feel nervous, and you can have your hands in your lap and no one will ever know.
Is this like an acupuncture thing? Like, yeah, they talk
Maybe.
about pressure points, right? And they put the little
Yeah.
needles in there.
Yeah. And so I
If you don't
know,
have a
like,
needle, use your pen. Just, you know,
drop it in there. Yeah. So if you
there you go.
just squeeze with any finger and thumb on the pad of your, or I guess the tissuey part of your finger and your thumb, that can help bring you back to center and focus you as well. So there are some other, things to, when it comes to boosting your confidence, like there's a power stance that you can do where you stand up and you stand like a superhero with your hands on your hips.
Power stance.
Mm-hmm. You can do push-ups ahead of time. If you feel like you need to get some stress out, like just try to do some push-ups, whether it's like literally on the floor or maybe against your wall to try to get some blood flow.
Do it in front of them in the interview. Just get down on the
Boost your
floor and give them
muscles.
20. Yeah.
So
Stress relief,
there's things that you can do to help regulate that physical and physiological response for nerves and anxiety. And really, this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Practicing and preparing will help you feel more calm and ready for your interview, which then will hopefully reduce your stress response.
Like, put it this way. If you've done 40 mock interviews before your actual job interview, you've done 40 pretend interviews with like a couple of different people, maybe a sibling or a parent or a friend or a career coach, or, you know what I mean? And you've been asked things like, tell me about yourself 40 times, you know what I mean? Over the period of like a couple weeks, you know what I mean? By that point, when your interview is up a couple of weeks later, you go for your actual interview and you sit down in the job interview and they say, so tell me about yourself. You're going to be substantially less nervous.
Yep.
Because you've heard this before. You've run through it so many times. You know your answer backwards, forwards, even when like, oh no, like you're in this real situation, you got all these people, these strangers staring at you. You're out of your comfort zone. You're on somebody else's turf. You're like in their office. It's all strange place you're in. Those things all amplify the sort of feeling of nervousness, anxiety. You just go into like, sort of like automatic mode and you just say your answer because it's automatic because you've rehearsed it so many times. You know what I mean? What's your current salary? What's the worst thing you've ever done? Whatever questions. It's like you've been through those so many times. So it really helps, like rehearsing is the way to, number one, feeling better. You're less nervous. You're not sweating. You're not like worried. You're not about to black out from like, just the anxiety or whatever.
You don't feel like you need your notes.
Yeah. And then you feel better. And then also you perform better. You do a better job. You give the right answers. You give them, without hesitating, without needing a moment to think beforehand, without like losing your train of thought halfway through. You know what I mean? Like you've made all those mistakes in rehearsal and then you've made up for them. You've practiced the right thing to do and it's automatic now.
Or
So
you
that's
know
what
how
you
to
need to do.
address them and overcome them in real time if a mistake does arise. It's the same thing, if you were to go to a play or a musical or, watch a movie, there's a reason why it's not just done on the first take. There's a reason why there's months of preparing before your, 3 to 7 shows you might be doing. So it's so worth it. And there's evidence to prove that this preparation significantly pays off.
Absolutely. Preach on, Sister Abby.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can be that person. You can have this for you. You'll feel confident. You'll be able to do a much better interview. All it takes is rehearsal. You got to put a little bit of time in, but it's really, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much of a chore. The biggest challenge is finding someone around, like in your home, like, maybe a friend, family member that can do this with you. If you absolutely have nobody, You can always get a career coach, that then go straight to that and use that for like rehearsal and stuff like that. Abby can tell you all about that. That's what she does. I don't do that. I don't provide that service, but she does. But that's the way to do it. Let's
Yeah.
get to, before we go into more of that, let's get to some of these questions here. Where did we leave off, Abby? Was it Ram? Was the next one?
Yeah, so Tong, I believe, is the next question. So how do you answer a question along the lines of, how do you think you communicate well, and what do you need to improve on your communication skills?
That's a subtle form of what is your weakness. Like they're probing for your weaknesses, and that's always a very sensitive thing. My philosophy is that it's a bit of a trap, and you need to wriggle out of it. But um,
Well,
what's your take on this?
yeah, just like a straight answer to that question for me, I personally, and again, this is my disclaimer, I'm, don't use a response that isn't true to you. For me personally, I think, okay, how do I communicate well? Well, I believe that I can build rapport with people, which then makes it easier to communicate with them because we have higher levels of trust, which means we can get things done faster. Things that I might need to improve on. Maybe I jump to speaking before, I hear a full question, and I remind myself actively to take some time to listen and fully understand what the other person is looking for or wanting before responding, something like that. But what you want to do, as it is with all of these interview questions, is you want to highlight things that you do really well that make you a great fit for the position. And if there's like that kind of underlying weakness question, or why shouldn't we hire you type thing, then you need to be able to be honest about something that you're working to improve and demonstrate how it's improving and the results that you've been able to achieve by working to improve those certain things. So that felt like a lot of vague, talking about all of those.
No,
But
that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, you don't, when it comes to communication, that is an essential part of every single job, because there is no job where you are working by yourself. Even if you are a solopreneur where you are by yourself with your own business, you have to communicate with clients and customers. You might have to communicate with other vendors, even if you are working by yourself at your computer. So communication is one of those things that you definitely need to have honed in, and you need to understand what you do really well and what you might not be doing so well, so that you can speak to it as if it's not holding you back and won't prevent you from doing a job well.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think, like, what would I say if I was asked this? I mean, it depends what level you're at. It depends what they're looking for.
Yeah.
It's going to depend on the industry and the types of communication they do. But sort of the general answer for me would be something along the lines of, well, when I communicate, I realize that there's kind of two facets to it. Number one is to communicate information, make sure that you are understood.
Mhm.
But the second element of it is that you want to preserve the good working relationship between you and the other person. So that's also a priority. So how I communicate in terms of sending information, or receiving information, I'm always going to prioritize, maintaining that good working relationship. It doesn't do me any good if someone understands what I'm saying but ends up hating my guts, or finding me off-putting, or finding me too intense, or too demanding, or you know what I mean. It's going to create issues later on. So I make sure that not only am I understood, but also you take the trouble to preserve the relationship. That may involve communicating additional things like manners and protocol, and things like this. Like when you meet someone, usually you take the trouble to ask, how are you doing? It's is that strictly necessary? No, but you're investing in the relationship, right? So that you have a good working relationship. In terms of the second part of the question, which is what do you need to improve on your communication skill? I mean, there's many different things here. The key thing is not to say something major, right?
Yes.
Like, oh, everybody that talks to me ends up hating me,
Right.
like you don't want to say anything major that's going to say, this is the reason why we shouldn't hire you. You need to give them something, but you need to give them something very benign that they're not going to regard as any kind of issue.
Yes.
Right?
Well, and I think there's like a follow-up question that Tong had for this, and I don't know if you can put it at the bottom of the screen, but is nothing to improve. an acceptable answer. Really couldn't think of anything when asked this and hadn't prepared. Do not say nothing to improve, because nothing to
Absolutely.
improve demonstrates that you don't have self-awareness. So while I might feel like I'm an exceptional communicator, I still have areas of growth. So what are those areas of growth? If you say that there's nothing to improve, then they're going to be saying, I totally am buying that. Next candidate. So you want to demonstrate that you have some self-awareness by indicating that you are aware that there are some growth areas and blind spots and that you are not perfect and you don't believe you're perfect. Because no one wants to work with someone who thinks they know everything and who thinks they have nothing to improve on.
Yeah, that, and it can be construed as a hostile answer.
Yeah.
You're basically saying, I refuse to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it can be taken like that. I
Yep.
know you want me to answer that. I'm not going to go into it. And it's kind of like, well, that's basically saying I refuse to answer your question.
Yeah.
The reason you get asked questions is because they want you to answer them. And so if you sort of blatantly refuse, that raises some issues. You're not being honest with us. You're not, you're being argumentative, combative, that kind of thing. So what I might say for something like this, when they say, what do you need to improve on in your communication skills? It's also a matter of signaling things by what you choose to say. You want to signal things. For example, the first part I was saying, like, I understand that communication is not just about making yourself clear. It's also about not pissing everybody off, and working well with people. That's also another thing going on with communication. So I would extend that. I would say, okay, communication. Now, when you communicate to different types of people, you need to change the way you communicate. So if someone has a different background or someone has a different personality type, if I'm communicating with them, maybe I'm trying to persuade them of something, and I'm going to tailor that based on what I know about what type of person they are. And I'm aware of this, and I try and do this actively.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, to this day, I'm still encountering new types of people with like unique personalities and backgrounds. I haven't seen that combination. So how you relate to them, how you get along well with them, you may choose to communicate differently to that person. I haven't met every type of person yet. So it's an ongoing process of refinement. Something like that. To me, that seems pretty benign. I don't know how other people would take it, but you're still answering the question, yet you're not giving any kind of major show-stopping problem with you. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, and I think, Tong mentioned that they couldn't think of anything when asked this and hadn't prepared a response to this. So I put 2 videos in the chat, one about transferable skills and then one about how to prepare answers to behavior-based questions. And both of those videos of mine really drill down to like the soft skill of communication. How do you prepare for a question about communication? The soft skill of conflict resolution, those types of soft skills where it's much harder to learn, but doesn't mean that you can't do it, but are usually consistent among industries, jobs, all of the things. So communication, for example, is something that will be essential to your success in any job you do. If you are a bad communicator, people are not going to want to work with you, and you could very easily get fired from your job. So that knowing that communication is an essential skill for success in any role, I need to prepare scenarios and situations that demonstrate that I am a good communicator in a written format, in a verbal format, etc. So don't let these types of questions take you by surprise because you're not prepared for it, because these are the sorts of skills that are required for success in any industry.
Absolutely. Abby, what do you think of Ram's question, the next one here, as a
As a
non?
non-English speaker, can I ask an interviewer politely to speak in their native language if they know it? You're making assumptions here that they may know your native language. I think that if you ask them if they know that language, and then if they say yes, then ask if they'd be willing to converse in that. That's one thing that you could do. I would definitely read the job description first, though, to see if knowing a specific language is a requirement of the job. So, for example, if you are applying to jobs and you speak a different language than English, but English is a requirement for the job, you probably wouldn't want to ask to speak in a different language than English, because you would want to be able to demonstrate your competency in the English language.
Like
So,
maybe that position, if you get it, unbeknownst to you, the supervisor is going to only speak English or something, and they need to communicate with you in English.
yep.
So, that might be an issue if you don't want to do the interview in English. That might signal that there's going to be a problem with English, and that
Yeah.
might be a disqualifying thing.
Yep. So I would say if English is a requirement or another language is a requirement of the job, you want to speak in the language that they've kind of started the interview in. If it's not a requirement and you think that the other person might know your language that's native to you and maybe native to them, then I think it's okay to ask if they'd be willing to converse in that language.
In large organizations, Abby, to your knowledge, is that something they can do? I would have thought that maybe that's kind of, I mean, it almost seems like it might break some kind of protocol. But when you think about it, I've never heard of a company rule that says you must conduct business in this language.
Yeah. So most of my experience is with the public sector. So government focused jobs. And it actually is a requirement to be able to speak English from the United States perspective. So if we were to have someone as a recruiter or hiring manager, if I were to have someone come in and say they only speak Spanish, then I might be concerned that they wouldn't be able to do their job if they requested the interview be done in Spanish, if their job requires some English. So all of the government jobs that I've been a part of have required you to be able to speak English, because that's the generally spoken language of the people.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that if the candidate is more comfortable speaking Spanish or some other language, and coincidentally the interview is also more comfortable speaking Spanish,
yes,
you still can't conduct the interview in Spanish because there are restrictions on it. So
they need to ensure that you know English from a business perspective, so that the person can be effective not only internally communicating with other people within the organization, but also externally communicating with community members, constituents, things like that. Now, they might say, we're going to conduct this interview in Spanish because we need to make sure that you have the skills to speak and communicate with Spanish speaking community members, but it is a requirement for you to also know English to be able to communicate with people internal to our organization. So they might notify you ahead of time that would be spoken in a different language. And if that's the case, then you definitely cannot ask to speak in a different language than they've.
Yeah. So there may be restrictions like that. There may be. So just be aware of that.
Yep.
We got David Peterson says, I have also been told I need to be more, I guess, enthusiastic and passionate, but how do you gauge that? It's purely on the perspective of the other person. Is that an absolute thing? No, but it's just the impression you give the other person.
Yep. Which, David, if you didn't catch our beginning conversation, I highly recommend that you record yourself via video doing a mock interview. You will be able to see your body language and how that conveys passion and enthusiasm or doesn't. So if I'm sitting here and I have no facial expression and no movement, that's not very enthusiastic or passionate. But when I'm moving around and I'm making eye contact and I have smiles or I have expressions on my face and I'm using
not speaking super slowly is another one, I think.
Yeah, monotone and boring with no inflection. All of those things are indicators of enthusiasm and passion to the interviewer. Another thing that you can do is ask questions at the end or even during the interview as they're appropriately coming up. Because if I have no questions at the end of an interview, then that kind of demonstrates that I haven't done my research and I'm not necessarily enthusiastic about the role. So not only is it some body language things that come into this, but also how you prepare for your interview. Have questions prepared for the end to demonstrate your interest and enthusiasm in the role.
Alpine's pal says, what's a good way to wrap up an answer to a question? You mentioned paragraph ending. This is a perfect correlation. I don't think there's a perfect way to wrap up an answer. You just answer the question and then you shut the hell up when you're done instead of rambling on and on and on, and they have to interrupt you,
Yes. And you're reading the room. If you are talking to an interviewer and you're giving a response to their question and they're like looking at you.
Or they're looking at you like this.
Mm-hmm. then, it's perfectly fine to say, did that
Yeah.
answer your question? And they might say, I'd like a little bit more clarification about this. But in most cases, you want to package your response with a very common format called STAR or CAR. CAR is my preference just because it's shorter and easier to remember. And this is a very common framework to answer any type of interview question. So CAR stands for context, action, result. When you frame your stories in that way, it's exactly that. It's a story. And your story has a beginning, middle, and end. When you end and say, and these were the results I achieved, cut. Then
If
you're
you
done.
want a way of ending, just say snap, or you could say bam, like that, right? That,
Yeah.
or something else, right? Yeah, some kind of percussive kind of thing at the end.
Mhm.
No, I think that, just saying, and that's the answer to the question, silence. Let there be a bit of a silence. That signals I'm done, and that signals now it's your turn to speak. You
Yes.
know,
Yep.
where are we here? Racing 912 Racing says I just interviewed for management. I didn't get the job. Okay. I always find it's like a bit of a charged word when people say management.
Mhm.
Like it's like there's me and then there's management. Like them. Us. Them. Kind of thing. That's how I always take that. There's a slight hint of that.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure if that's maybe part of the problem. But anyway, we'll find out. I just interviewed for management. I didn't get the job, but they said I did very well. The manager's feedback said I need more detailed answers regarding change management. Any advice for me on this? Well, management is a field of study, and it's one of the newer areas of business, and it's evolving quite quickly. And basically, it's if you're not familiar with it, it's you know what happened was in the 80s and in the early 90s, a lot of businesses tried to roll out big changes. Like, for example, they roll out a new computer system and then they dictate to everybody, now you got to use the new system, right? And it ends up being a disaster. People try to use it, but they don't know how. People don't want to use it, so they resist. The new system has bugs, and it doesn't work properly. And then the whole thing fails. It costs them a ton of money, and then they end up having to roll back that change and go back to the old system. So there were a lot of cases of things like this. So they came out with this field of study saying the problem is that it's not that the change is bad. It's just that the workforce, the workers that had to do this change were resistant to it.
Yes.
They didn't want to learn it. They didn't want to use it. They actively opposed it. And they passively aggressively refused to use it. So if we could get them to want to use it and to be excited about, like, they see it as a positive step forward instead of like some step back, then it'll actually work. So this field of study is about how to persuade people to, like, change is good. Change is your friend.
How do you embrace it and then end up better than where you were before the change? And
Yeah.
in many cases, I mean, I'm sure that, 912 Racing, you've probably had several experiences where a change has occurred and it's been very disruptive in your life, whether it's been personal or professional. So what are some examples of how you've handled that in the past? How have you, addressed this change? How, if you knew this change was coming, how did you prepare yourself and others around you for this change? I would recommend, in addition to, thinking about more detailed answers that are applicable to you specifically, take a class. It could be just a half day class. It could be a YouTube video webinar. It could be anything on change management, because you'll probably learn some really interesting concepts on effective change management. What works well, what doesn't work as well. If things are going poorly, how do you, get everyone back on the same page and unite to, embrace this change? So there's a lot of aspects to this. Like Bill said, it's an entire field of study. People will go and get higher degrees, master's degrees, PhDs, etc., in change management, and will work with organizations to implement new changes. So that's one of the things with management, though. It's kind of constantly changing. If you're going into a leadership position and you're going to be managing people, one of the things you'll probably be doing pretty regularly is managing the change that's occurring in the organization. It might be huge change, like we're switching from this computer system to this computer system, and it's going to disrupt everything. And it might also be something a little bit smaller, like, and more frequent, like maybe someone on our team is leaving. So how do we manage the change of this person no longer being in their position, managing their workload and filling the position and training someone new? So there's all like a huge range of what those changes could be. Even more minuscule, like what if we get a new coffee maker and no one knows how to use the coffee maker, and then we don't have coffee and then everyone's cranky? Like there's all these things that could happen because of good or bad change management. So learn a little bit about it, read it, listen to some podcasts.
It's all about communication. Like that's the bottom line. It's instead of like, we're rolling out a computer system and we're not bothering to tell anyone about it. It's like an afterthought. Should we tell anyone about this? Should we train anyone? That was always kind of an afterthought. So the idea was, listen, let's inform people what's going on, that already they feel like respected more, that, the company is taking time to like explain to them, listen, here's what we're doing. Yeah. Like, we care about you. You're important. Here's what we're doing. Here's the plan. This is what we're doing. This is all the changes. This is how you fit into it. Now, here's some training on the new system. So when it comes here, you guys know what's going on and you know how to use it. Now, are there any questions? Are there any concerns? Let's address your questions, address your concerns. I'm sure everything isn't going to be all perfect, but let's see if we can at least help, to try and take care of obvious issues that might come up. It makes people like it works on a couple of different levels. It works on a practical level and it works on a sort of morale level, so it's all about communication both ways. That's what change management basically is. And it's so that when you make this change, it could be someone, like it could be you're getting a new boss, you're getting a new divisional president. Here's what's going on. Here's the new person. This is what they're like. This is what their priorities are going to be. Just so everyone knows, they're going to start on this day. This is how it's going to work. Or you're absorbing another company. You're going to be combining your business unit with another business unit, and here's how it's going to work, and that kind of stuff. So interesting area. Just remember communication. Okay, communication skills are super important for change management.
Which goes back to that previous question about how do you communicate? Like, how do you think you communicate well, and what can you do to improve? You've got to be prepared for that. So communication is like one of the most important aspects of any job because it just is interacting with other people. So prepare for describing what you do really well when it comes to communicating and what areas you recognize are maybe not your strongest points.
Absolutely. David Peterson goes on, rehearsing for an interview tomorrow. Have spent all weekend crawling through the job description using AI with my resume and all old stars / tell me about stories I have. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's kind of a statement.
Preparation. If you can find someone to do a mock interview with, whether it's a family member, a friend, someone like me who is a career coach, if you're in the United States, your local workforce center, if you can find someone to do a mock interview with, that's the next step.
Alpine Zapal says, this may be a silly question. You better hope it isn't, because if you're wasting my time, Alpine Zapal, I'm going to ban you instantly. But I once had an idea of wearing what I or employees I've seen would wear at that job. Does this defeat the purpose of what? That's not a stupid idea. If you look like one of the people that works there, that helps, especially with all this focus on fit. If you show up looking like you belong there, that's a good start.
Yep. And so I think like there's a couple things. If you're going to be working for an organization that has a uniform, getting the uniform and showing up in the uniform might make the interviewer go like, wait a second, have you worked here before? Like they might have some questions about that, but you can still replicate the uniform look without wearing their specific uniform. So for example,
clicking salute also, the company clicking salute.
So you can wear similar clothes. My recommendation is always to wear the same level of dress or one step above for the interview process. So if the standard attire for an employee in an organization is a, quarter button up polo with a collar, short sleeve with khakis and closed-toed shoes, at minimum, wear something like that. The like next thing to do is dress one level above that. So maybe I'll wear, a long sleeve, full button up shirt with a, sport jacket or something like that, sport coat that I can then take off when I arrive with, slacks and closed toed shoes. You do not want to dress below the dress code for the organization.
A barrel with suspenders. That's dressing below.
Well, and I'm in Colorado, so we have the barrel man from Broncos where he would wear just a barrel with suspenders to winter snowstorm games for football.
With the little tap in it, yeah.
Yes. So it's possible.
Dressed for the job you want, right? So that means you're going to come dressed as a Mexican wrestler, right?
Though at the same time.
In the company uniform.
Yes, Nacho Libre. At the same time, I interviewed for a position and I dressed, I dressed, I wore a dress, I wore, short heels, and dressed in what I would call as like very professional, not, formal professional, but professional wear, not something I would wear to work every single day. And one of the pieces of feedback I got was they were curious if I would be able to relate with some of the clients and customers that they served who were much more blue collar and would wear like jeans on the job, steel-toed shoes, things like that. And so overdressing could actually hurt your opportunity. So you want to be very strategic about what you're going to wear to this interview. You don't want to dress below the dress code, and you don't want to overdo it with the dress code either.
Yeah. And coming back to Alpine's, you're going to make me say it again. Coming back to this person's suggestion, it's not stupid to go and do like a Google search, an image search for the company, see if you can find like photos of the company and their employees, and you look at how they dress. Sometimes they're all in suits. Sometimes they're all in jeans. Sometimes they're all in some weird hybrid thing with like golf shirts and, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like there's different variations. And if all else fails, you can always contact the recruiter or whatever point of contact and say like, would business casual be appropriate? What's the dress code?
And I would say, if unsure, business casual is your safe dress, like level of dress. But if you can reach out to someone who can tell you exactly what the level is that's expected, then that's very safe. That's the safest bet.
And stiletto heels to give you an edge. That's right. Mm-hmm. Ram says, I get it now. Good. Alpine's pal says, also, is there a way to shift the conversation to things that are actually relevant to the job rather than at best just a hint at the job? Are you comfortable climbing a ladder?
Yes.
No, I get a rash and I can't climb the ladder.
Yeah.
Well, you should always try and steer the conversation to the job you're there to interview for. How does that relate to this job? That's what you should be doing.
Yep. And I would say if that doesn't come up during the actual like formal interview, there will be an opportunity, hopefully at the end, for you to ask questions. So, are you comfortable climbing a ladder? Might be a question that was asked as a supplemental question on the application. Or maybe it was a statement said like, must be comfortable climbing ladders. And if you're like, what is that about? I haven't gotten any indication that I'll be climbing ladders for this job. You can bring that up and you can say, I noticed on the job description, it said that the ideal candidate would be comfortable climbing ladders. Can you tell me a little bit about how that might show up in my workday? And then let them give you the answer like, oh yeah, well, we work in a library where it's like 3 stories worth of books. And so while it's not normal for you to have to, bring a ladder to change a light bulb, you may have to climb a ladder to reach the top shelf. Then you're like, oh, great. Totally something I can do.
And what you just said, that was a very good way of phrasing that, actually. I thought, that's the right way to bring that up.
And it's kind of another behavior-based question for them. Like, can you tell me a little bit about this? It's open-ended. It's not going to just get a yes or no response from them, which will then make it feel more like a conversation with the interviewer rather than, a black and white yes-no interview.
They say, can you tell me a bit about this? And you say, yes.
And just look at them.
Yeah, there you go. It's a yes or no question. Junkyard Cybertruck says, tap that like yell. Tap it. I've heard about 400 different synonyms for that, like smash the like, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of creative ways of saying that. Yeah. But yes, you should. And you should. Yes, you should tell your friends. And you should come back because we do this every 2 weeks, every Monday, every second Monday. Yep. So we answer questions together. So.
Yep. The next comment that came through is running at altitude. It says, how do you respond when the interviewer says you are overqualified? Ooh, this is a good one. I have a couple videos on this topic. So, Bill, why don't you respond while I find my videos to share in the chat?
That's where you roll up your sleeves and say, or you want to make something of it. Listen, overqualified, it can mean a whole kaleidoscope of different things depending on the context. Sometimes it's like a sort of blanket term that means that we're just passing you over, or we're going that way, right? Other times it can be like almost like a challenge.
Mhm.
They say, well, you seem this, what do you say to that? And it's like a challenge for you to then justify yourself, make a case for yourself, right? So it's a very slippery term. It's used in a variety of different ways. It can signal you're you're too old, or you're aging for what they had in mind. It can signal other things. So listen, the answer to that question, as far as I'm concerned, is if they suggest, you we're concerned that you might be overqualified, something like that, and you basically say, well, no, I don't feel like I am, and then you basically make a case for yourself of why you're a fit for the role, and that includes responding to the requirements, saying I've got this, and I if the concerns are the aging thing and you suspect that might be the source of this, you can proactively address that. What are some of the negative traits associated with age, Abby? It's like what, like a lack of a desire to learn new things, like
Yep.
you know,
Yep. Maybe I'm a little bit too rigid in my way of doing things.
yeah,
Maybe I'm not willing to accept technology. Maybe they're worried I'm going to retire soon and they'd rather have someone who's going to stick around longer. There's a lot of reasonings why they might say that you're overqualified. If the interviewer just flat out says, I think you're overqualified for this job, my response would be, wow, tell me a little bit about that, because I'm really excited for this role. I think I'm a good fit. What makes you think that I'm too qualified for this? And then see if they can give you some background and some information about it. Make it more of a conversation, not putting them on the defensive, but asking them to tell you a little bit more. Then if they're like, well, it looks like you have a PhD for this and we're looking for someone who has no education, why are you applying for this job? Then you can give them some more detail. If they say, well, this is an individual contributor job, you have supervisory and management experience, why would you be applying to this job? All of those things, if you just ask them for a little bit of clarification as to why they feel like you're overqualified, that gives you a good basis to then kind of justify why you've decided to apply for this role versus a different one that you may be better qualified for.
that's a good approach. You'd also say, I may have a PhD, but I can sweep a floor like a mofo, pal.
I'm here to take your job.
Yeah, there you go. That always goes over. Don't say that, by the way. Like people sometimes think that that's like a legitimate answer to. I think it's like the "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" question. Don't say that. Like in
No.
your job, yeah. It's like okay, rejected.
Yeah. Yeah. This person is suddenly a threat to me. So we're getting them out of here as quickly as possible.
Yeah, don't ever say that. That usually doesn't go down well. There's always exceptions to everything, but as a general rule, that doesn't work.
Don't do it.
Okay,
Ram is next.
Ram.
It said, as a CS grad, computer science grad, can I use ChatGPT voice mode to simulate and conduct a mock interview? Why not? Like, you can certainly
You could try it.
do it, but I would highly recommend that you do a mock interview with another real human being who can give you more tangible feedback than what AI might be able to do. AI will probably analyze the content of your responses, but that won't be able to give you feedback on your body language. It won't be able to give you feedback even on like your tone of voice, your like passion, if you're construing that through your answers. Like yes, you can use ChatGPT through the voice mode option. The priority would be to do a mock interview with another human being, ideally someone you don't know, who can give you unbiased, objective feedback.
See, Ram, the way this works is that, the fact that you would ask a question like this, okay, it's sort of subtly signaling some things about you. There's alliteration. And the thing is that computer science students and graduates in general, and I know about this a bit, I've got some experience with this, very, very bright from a technical perspective. They can do crazy math like a whiz. That's awesome. Where their weak spot is generally is dealing with people. So the communication skills, being able to interoperate, collaborate, that kind of stuff, being able to communicate effectively, uh, that's usually their weak spot. So the half the point of rehearsing a job interview with another person is specifically not to like rehearse the technical answers that you're delivering, but to be able to communicate, to be able to have the right body language, to be able to have rapport with somebody, to be able to have charisma with somebody. That's the human elements that you're going to be rehearsing while you are doing a practice interview with a person, and that's a big part of why you would do it. Now, for engineering students, science students, computer science students, uh, even technicians, like more the technical areas, it's even more important that you brush up on your people skills in interviews, because if anything's going to get you rejected, it's going to be that. That's why
Communication
you need to
and your
brush up.
ability to connect with and communicate with others is like the most important thing. And it's probably one of the reasons why they're having you go through an interview process. If they only cared about your skills, they would test your skills and not bring you in for an interview. But the point
Absolutely.
of an interview is to see how you're going to fit in with the rest of the team that you'll be working with. And the basis for that is your ability to communicate.
Now, if I were to venture a guess, I would suspect that upon hearing the answer that Abby and myself just gave you, your immediate reaction is probably going to be to say bullshit. That's not worth doing. That's not important for what I do, which is very technical things. Okay,
Maybe you're
but
used to just sitting at a computer all day and just interacting with code.
yes, but what I can tell you from years of experience with dealing with people in these areas is that generally speaking, people in this field, especially young people, they have a blind spot. The blind spot is that they don't respect these skills,
Yes.
therefore they don't work on them, therefore they are bad at them. That is the general trend. So
And therefore, they have a hard time getting a new job or a job at all because
exactly.
they're not able to connect with the interviewers.
Now imagine if you had the technical chops. Okay, they could throw technical problems at you. You can knock them out of the park. You know your stuff. But then also, you're the type of person they want to work with. They enjoy working with. There's never any misunderstandings, never any communication issues. Nobody ever gets upset, trying to coordinate things with you and stuff. They're always enthusiastic because they want to work with you over and above anybody else.
Mhm.
Imagine if you had that in your court. You would knock it out of the park. You would be in high demand. That's 2 out of 2. Okay. Usually, most computer science people, they have 1 out of 2, and their weak spot is dealing with them.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have a lot of experience in this area, like either dealing with students, dealing with entrepreneurs, dealing with contractors, dealing with other companies, where you got to deal with someone that's like a young, recent grad, of these various technical areas. That's always the weak point and always the reason why I don't want to hire that firm. I want to hire this firm because I would rather deal with them.
Yep.
So anyway, I'm not going to hit it any harder, but that's why, even though you can use like AI tools for like a mock interview, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and it may serve a purpose in helping you memorize the technical answers. You still have to work on the human element. As Abby said, that's the entire point of an interview, or else they would have just mailed you a test. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
And I use AI and ChatGPT and Grok to help me prepare for my mock interviews that I'm doing with clients. But it's more to help me analyze the job description and come up with potential job interview questions, but not to actually conduct the mock interview itself. So, sure, there's like all the very common questions like, tell me about yourself. What is your greatest strength? What is your greatest weakness? Do you have any questions for me? Those questions that are relatively predictable and common among whatever interview you might be doing. But then there's also questions that I'm not an expert in. So I'm not an accountant. So I'm not going to be able to come up with an accountant specific interview questions to ask a person who's interviewing for an accountant position during a mock interview. So I'm going to utilize ChatGPT or Grok or another generative AI platform to help me generate some of those questions, which is a great option for you as a candidate to see what types of questions could be asked during this interview. But just using AI and not engaging with another human for a mock interview is going to put you at a disadvantage to the person who is choosing to use a human.
And I'm planning to use ChatGPT to help me have conversations with my wife. I'll let you know how it goes.
Yes.
Nicola says, hello, how do you recommend staying motivated while job searching? And also, how do you recommend navigating with AI sorting through applications? I have been struggling with this while job searching. I interview really well and have a lot of drive, but lack of interviews for a fighting chance is really tough. Would you like to take this, Abby?
Yeah, and I feel your pain. It's tough when it comes to job searching. And as much as I don't want to admit to this, it's a numbers game. So the goal isn't to apply to thousands of jobs with low quality applications, but the goal also isn't to apply to 3 jobs with high quality applications. So it's about luck, you finding the right company with the right role, with the right people at the right time. And you can't really predict that. So the job search process is going to take some time, and you have to be very intentional about it. I think that it's really easy also for people to use AI sorting through applications and applicant tracking systems as an excuse for why they might not be getting interviews or moving through the process. Recruiters and hiring managers will use AI or applicant tracking systems to do a quick sort. But if you have the minimum qualifications, usually then a real human being will look at your application. So if you're not getting any interviews and you're not being moved forward in the application process, it actually probably has something to do with your application. Probably your resume, maybe with your cover letter, if you did or did not include one, maybe your answers to supplemental questions, something that's indicating that you do not have the minimum qualifications for the job. Once it is kind of confirmed that you at least meet minimum qualifications, then it goes into maybe a deeper analysis of your experience and then ranks you for your preferred qualifications. So it's like a whole process, but saying that AI is preventing me from getting through or the applicant tracking systems are working against me is just an excuse. So you need to figure out what's going wrong. If you're not getting any interviews, probably something is happening with your actual application and probably your resume. If you are getting interviews and then you're just not getting moved forward, then it probably has something to do with how you're showing up during the interview process. So when it comes to staying motivated while job searching, I recommend that you set yourself kind of a schedule as if it were a job for you to do the job searching. So set some goals, know how many applications you want to submit per day or per week. If you are unemployed, you want to treat your job search like a full-time job. You want to get dressed for the day. You don't just want to be sitting in your PJs on your couch with your feet kicked up, just applying randomly to things. You want to have some structure and intention to it. And recognize that probably 80 to 90% of these you're not going to hear back. Now, this is going to send us into a completely different trajectory that Bill and I are trying to stay away from for this specific live stream, which is the concept of networking. Networking is what will help you overcome the numbers game. So, Bill, I'm going to go back to our previous live stream and link it into the chat so this person can watch it if they're interested. So we don't have to go into a whole 50-minute conversation about networking, which is where both of us want to go. But you either apply and you just deal with the numbers game, or you network and it helps reduce the numbers game.
Absolutely. Yeah. The motivation thing, I think that like Abby said, you need to have a clear separation. Like the problem is that when you're between jobs and you need to get a job and you're doing job search, it becomes just all encompassing. You're always thinking about it. You're always on. You're never like separated from it. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. All I know is that for me, for dealing with stuff like this, what's helped is, when the weekend comes, for example, you could say, look, like I'm going to do job search full on Monday to Friday. I'm going to eat, sleep, breathe it. When I go to sleep, I'm going to dream about it. But then on the weekend, I'm going to try and just get it out of my mind for a couple of days just to maintain my sanity, as much as possible. And so what I would say is force yourself to do something that traditionally you enjoy, whether it's hanging out with friends, reading a book, playing video games, watching TV, whatever it is that kind of you're into that makes you feel good. You're not going to feel like doing it because you're in this place, with job search and the anxiety and the rejection and all that. Just force yourself to go and do a bit of it, even though you don't feel like it. And you can start to get that escapism. And at least for maybe like the weekend, you can just feel like a regular person again. And, you don't have this thing, the black clouds hanging over you. Mm-hmm. And that will give you longevity. That's an investment in yourself. You'll be able to go for longer and you'll be able to be effective at this. You don't burn out. So that's also, that's just my amateur advice. That's what's helped me in the past deal with things like this. And I've been between jobs like, years earlier and stuff. So stuff like that. And like Abby said, we're not going to get into it today, but there's the posted job market, there's the hidden job market, and they're two different worlds. And if you're not having any luck in the posted job market, you're not getting callbacks. I agree with Abby. And I say that like if you're really working hard and you're applying to a lot of things, but you're getting nothing, then that does suggest that your application is less than ideal. There might be something going on there. That's what it suggests. But so number one, I would suggest improving that, trying to figure out what the bug is and fix it. Maybe you're not tailoring your resumes, like whatever. You need to tailor your applications, but then at the end of the day, there's this whole other world called the hidden job market. You access it through networking. If you know nobody, that's fine. If you're an introvert, that's fine. You can still access those jobs. We're not going to get into how, but we both, I think, talk about that normally quite at length. So go do your own research on it. Go come back and listen to both our channels. And, we can get into that with you if that's also something you want to pursue, but it's always there.
Yes, agreed.
Okay.
The next comment is Alpine's pal.
We have different modes here. I'd like to mix it up. We got this. We're not actually showing any slides or anything. Maybe in the future we should like put up some slides or something. But
yeah.
But we got this. I'm gonna switch it to this for now, just for the sake of change.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if it's my connection or maybe your connection, Bill, but it's glitching. I'm hearing you glitch on your end.
Okay, it might be mine. I don't know.
It could be mine too. So if I freeze, then nobody panic. We'll be back.
Okay, we'll try and all remain calm, no matter what happens.
So Alpine's pal says, speaking of good communication and networking, is it inappropriate to message a manager to ask for the job? Yes, depends on what platform, but is there a best/efficient way to do this? What do you think, Bill?
Well, the answer is yes. It's quite an involved answer. We have to go into a lot of things to cover that, but yes, you can. There are ways to do it, and then there's ways not to do it. Yep. Learn all you can about how to do it. I talk about that quite extensively. I have a course where I take people through exactly what to do that I've done personally and other people have done. And there's many different ways. I did a video 3 weeks ago called How I'd Get a Job, and I covered 11 different ways of getting a job. And a couple of those ways involve reaching out to the managers, to the hiring managers, the people that can hire you, and how to approach them and what specifically to ask for. Yeah. You can ask for the job directly, or you could ask for some indirect thing, like maybe a meeting or whatever. That's kind of an indirect way. There's many different ways of doing it.
And I would say if your approach is please hire me, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So what's tough is that there's no blanket answer that Bill or I could give you that will satisfy this question, because it is dependent on the manager. It's dependent on the history you have with that person or don't have with that person. It is dependent on the industry, the role. There's lots of things that go into that. So just blatantly saying, hire me, that's desperate and it's going to turn people off. But there is an effective way to probably go about it, and it would require more one-on-one conversation, I think.
But I think that it bridges into a whole topic, which I think more younger people need to be tuned into, which is Like, you know, you're going outside the rules. You're not following some company's hiring process that they've said, okay, step one, you do this. Step two, then we call you. Step three, then you come in. Step four, then we send you that. You know, it's not a standardized process. You're going outside the rules. You're sort of hacking things. And that's how the real world works. You see, older people know this, younger people may not. It's that you have the right to speak to anyone. You know, like in a free country, in a free society. There's no rule that says you can't talk to that person, you know? Now, the way it works is that like yes, you have the freedom to talk to them and you have the means to talk to them. Using the internet, you can discover who that person is that is in charge of this thing that maybe you have an interest in. You can also then that's the way you send a message to them and that they will get it, right? So great, you got the means. Now the question is, what do you say? What's the right way to do this? It depends on what you're asking for and all the details. But there's no standard process. And the more of this stuff you learn, the more capable you end up being because you can get any information you could ever think of. You can find the person in the world who knows that very specific information that only 3 people in the whole world know. You can find a person who knows that. And if you understand, if you have abilities like this, you could talk to that person and get them to tell you, you know, you can open up all kinds of opportunities for yourselves. So these are great skills to be able to develop. And I've gone on at length. I'm not going to do it today, but I'll just say that when people go through school is kind of the opposite of that because they want everyone to follow rules, their way of implementing orders to just make rules for everything. So we get used to following rules. They'll just tell me what to do and I'll just follow what they say and then this will happen. And when
the
you get out
rule
into the real
is you
world,
have to apply online and submit an application and then you don't go on and you talk to someone individually, it's not going to set you apart from anyone.
Yeah. And like, that's why I think that like, you know, the posted job market, it's a default for especially young people because it sort of gives them that comfort. Like, here's how it works. You should do this, then we do that. Like, here's the process. It's very comfortable. It's better than the alternative, which is there are no rules. Figure it out. You know, like
right.
You know, ask
and
for the job.
When it's the process, then it's much easier to blame the process than to take some responsibility and accountability for what the applicant might be doing that is not getting the results that they're wanting to achieve.
Like the reality for a lot of things is people they wonder like, okay, why do recruiters or hiring managers pick this person over other more qualified candidates? So it's a big mystery. Why did they choose them? A lot of times the reality is like, honestly, they didn't really care who they picked, but this person, they seemed like they wanted it more. They were the most enthusiastic. They were the ones that got all up in our faces and said like, hey, I'm here. I can do this. You know, whereas everybody else didn't.
Right.
So
and I've seen
look at them first.
Yeah. And I've seen the, things over the internet where it's like this person put their resume as like a screen print on a cake that they had delivered to like that got them the job because it was so out of the ordinary and surprising to the hiring team, or they had donuts delivered to like there are things, and you don't have to go to that extent.
No, you don't.
I'm going to jump to a different question in the chat, and then we're going to come back to Christian's question because it's great to see Christian here.
Okay.
But Andrew Park says, what are your thoughts on dropping off a physical portfolio of my work to get in front of hiring managers? And I feel like this question goes along with what we're talking about. Rather than just blindly submitting applications and hoping to get in front of someone, taking the effort to go in person and drop off a physical portfolio that's demonstrating your work product is a great idea. Why not? What else do you have to lose? If you are passively submitting applications through the online posted job market, the chances of you getting in front of a hiring manager are slimmer than if you were to be a little bit more in their face, show up in person and say, here, this is an example of the work that I can do.
Absolutely. You wanted to tie that into, is it Christian's question?
No, that was just tying into our conversation that we're having about.
Oh, okay. Then I'd like to respond to this and say,
yep.
like, yeah, like that's kind of along the lines of what we've been talking about. Like you're taking initiative to just go ahead and do something of your own design, that will hopefully get you in front of the right people. Now, everything Abby said is correct. Like it signals you want the job, you're enthusiastic about that job specifically because you're putting all this effort into doing this thing, that signals a few things of yours. Um, now imagine if that landed in front of the boss. The boss is the one that received this, and they go, this is interesting. It's from somebody. If I'm going to hire somebody, you know, I might check this person out first, right? Now, alternatively, imagine if that landed at the feet of, say, the person like the director of HR, the person who designed the official process for how they say you should get hired. They say first you submit an application, then we look at all the applications, then we call you, then you come in. Now, if it went to that person, what would that person's reaction be? It would probably be, wait a minute, you're not following my procedure. So I'm not responding favorably to this. In fact, I'm annoyed by it. I'm going to send you back to the website to apply through the standard channel that we've told you is the way you should apply for jobs. So it also depends on who it goes to, right?
Right. If you just show up to the front office of the building and you just give it to the first person you see, they may not even know what you're talking about or who you're wanting to get in touch with, and throw it in the trash or the recycle bin right away. So you do need to do your research ahead of time to know where you need to go, who you want to talk to. If you can't talk to that specific person, can you talk to someone who knows that specific person and will, guarantee that they're going to hand it off to them? So it's more than just showing up and passing it to the first person you see. But if you can get it to the right person, it will likely make more of an impact than a anonymous application where they can put no face to the name or like demonstrated work product.
Absolutely. And something that I've heard a lot, and I imagine you've heard a lot, Abby, is, with this kind of stuff, is that some younger people, and I always say younger people, I mean like people that are kind of not too experienced at job search, they've heard like, okay, there's this hidden job market, and they've heard about like, okay, I could reach out to companies. So they try some of these things, but the problem is, who do they reach out to? They reach out to the recruiter, and like, no offense to recruiters, but the recruiters are part of the official hiring process. So a recruiter's default position, and you can give me your take on this, Abby. A recruiter's default position would be like, well, you're trying to kind of get around our official system. I'm going to refer you back to our official system,
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so job seekers, they encounter that response. They say, well, they just told me to apply on the website. So they get this impression that, oh, okay, that approach doesn't work. And that's false. It does work. It's just that you're going to the wrong person. You need to go to the boss
Right.
and not the recruiter.
Yep. And for example, I have a friend who I thought would be a great applicant for a specific job that I saw posted by another friend that I have. So I'm kind of like that connection for them. So I reached out to my friend who posted the job and said, hey, I have someone in mind. Would I be able to connect this person with you? And that person was like, well, I'm actually the hiring manager, so I don't want to make it an unfair, situation where there's conflict of interest, but I would be happy to talk to this person. And so it could be as simple as that, like having someone else make a connection for you. Well, I would hope that the hiring manager wouldn't have bias towards this person as a result of a single conversation. I've now given the opportunity for my friend to get in front of someone whom she would not have been able to get in front of right away. She would have maybe talked to a recruiter, maybe not even made it to a recruiter because of the applicant tracking system, and her resume may not have been the right thing. But I've actually been able to make this connection to the hiring manager directly, who is going to try to stay as unbiased as possible. But now we've got a face to the name, we've got some conversation, we've got some questions, etc., that start to come up and make the hiring manager feel a little bit more obligated to give this person a second look than they would for an anonymous application.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables here. Like, for example, we're also talking about a situation where the company has posted a job. Like a lot of jobs never get posted. And sometimes the hiring managers don't involve recruiters, and, if so, for example, if you're taking this approach for a job that's been posted, they've already embarked down like a standard company process to fill the position, and then you're trying to go around it. you may encounter people that are not enthusiastic about, what you're doing. They're just referring you back. Why are you not following our official process? Whereas if you had gone to the hiring manager when they haven't posted a job and said like, hey, I'd love to work for you guys. I know you hire a lot of people that, are qualified in what I do. And I know about your company. You do this work, and that's exactly the kind of opportunity I'm looking for. And if ever you're looking for someone that could do this, I'm right here and I'd love to work for you. Give me a call, and they're not looking for a job. They haven't already started a recruitment campaign where they're filtering candidates and stuff. It's like, then it would be much more effective that these kinds of approaches would work. So there's a lot of variables. That's why it's hard to talk about this stuff and answer quick questions, because, there's a lot of principles involved. It gets very messy.
Yes. All right.
We got a lot of questions to do, and we're pretty much at our cutoff. So let's see if we can get through these quickly.
Sounds good. So Christian, great to see you again. Christian said that I've been working with a temp agency to help find me some work. My recruiter has submitted my application to positions. So far, they've moved on to other candidates. This is concerning to me, but my recruiter is still acutely, or maybe accurately or actively working to help me find work. What could be the issue? Same thing. When I have worked with temp agencies to hire individuals, usually what will happen is I will go to them with a job that I want to fill. They'll send me several resumes that they think are people who could be good fits for it. And then I look through them and I pick the top 3 that I want to interview and move through the interview process. There have been several times where I've decided not to move forward with any of those candidates because they're not exactly what I'm looking for. So it's just a process. I would say that at this point, there's not necessarily a pattern of something being wrong on your end. So give it a little bit of extra time. Working with the temp agency, I wouldn't say my experience has been that the temp agency will submit applications for positions, but it's more like, we have this pool of candidates. Here are ones that seem like they could meet the organization's needs. Here are their resumes. Let me know who you want to talk to. So that's what it is probably happening. There's still like another layer of interviewing and review and all that stuff that still has to occur. But it sounds like this is just the first time this has happened. And if you start to get to a point where it's been like 8 or 10 times, then that would probably be a good time to talk to the recruiter, the person who's in charge of your profile or whatever it is with the temp agency, and say, you've submitted my application or my resume for 10 jobs and I haven't been a good fit for any of them. What do you think is going on? They're probably going to get a commission for working with you and placing you someplace. There's some benefit that they're getting. And so they're not going to sugarcoat it necessarily. They're going to try to help you find a job. So they're hopefully going to give you some good real world feedback on what might be going wrong if there is something that's going wrong. At this point, I think it's too early to tell.
Makes sense. I think the next one is Alpine's Pal again. This may be a silly question. Whoops, I just fired myself. Yeah, there are no silly questions, Alpine's Pal, just silly people. That's all we got to remember. No, I say that myself. This may be a stupid question, but, and I get corrected sometimes too. You don't want to do that in a job interview. You don't put disclaimers. Don't ever say anything negative about yourself or anyone else. DJ something or other pro
Ricky
says, if they're, how do you pronounce that? There's an exclamation mark in there. If they say you're overqualified, could be a workplace red flag. Mm-hmm. They don't want to pay for your skills. Not every job you apply to will be good for you.
Agreed.
Possibly.
Yeah. It certainly could indicate that they are going to engage in in age discrimination or something like that. Doesn't mean that's always the case, but it could be a flag of some color.
Yeah. David Peterson says, my interview tomorrow, many of the tools they use I'm familiar with, but I lack hands-on experience with. Just got a certification on them last month. Advice on how to answer those questions. I can't really say because I don't know what the tools are, but you could mention the fact that you just got qualified in them. I'd say that's a big thing in your favor.
And hypothetically, what would you do? If you want me to use, let's just say Canva, that's a tool that I use pretty frequently. It's kind of like a graphic design thing. It's got a free version and a pro version. Let's say I'm applying to a graphic design job and I've never officially used Canva, but I've used something similar to it. I might say, oh, that's a great question. Here's how I would approach doing this specific type of work in this platform. You probably have transferable skills that will set you up for success in it. At other points, for example, if you were to have, no hands-on experience with Microsoft Excel and they want you to know how to do pivot tables and all those things in it, you probably can't talk your way to convince them that you have the skills to use that tool. So you've got to know, like, if you are familiar with similar tools and you know that they have similar concepts, maybe you can get your hand on a free trial so you can actually get get into the system and practice with it. That's what I would recommend doing. There are some programs where you're not going to be able to fake it. You got to know it. You got to have the experience.
I like what you said about the transferable skills. I think that if ever they throw like a question like that at you and they say, "How are you with this?" and it's like some silly new thing that like, no, you don't know that because that's not the industry standard, and it's very new that came out. It's like a default answer to maybe sort of try and salvage the situation for those type of questions is to say, well, I've used a lot of similar spreadsheet programs and they all work very similar in principle and they all have their own version of pivot tables or, whatever we're talking about. So, I mean, I understand with it. I don't see it as a major problem. I've used a lot of that type of thing before, and it's always usually very intuitive to sort of switch between one platform and another when it comes to these specific functions, or something like that. And it's like, so you're not saying like, I know how to use it and lying, but you're saying it's not going to be a big issue. I'm pretty sure I can handle it,
And then saying like, I'm also very comfortable finding resources to help me learn,
Yeah, that's good too.
I'm not comfortable with. Maybe I'm an expert in Microsoft Excel, but I don't quite know how to use Google Sheets. Well, they're very similar. There are also some differences, but I know how to Google and I know how to watch YouTube videos and I can teach, you're not necessarily going to say that to them, but you're thinking to yourself, like, I know how to find the resources to help me accomplish the same goal in Google Sheets that I might accomplish in Microsoft
Yeah,
Excel.
pretty quickly and pretty efficiently. I can usually solve those little problems. I do that on a regular basis,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was David Peterson. So Alive says it's frustrating to be inarticulate because of all my meds scrambling up my head, but it's meds or no work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I can't organize my thoughts, not even on paper, but apparently I'm not disabled either, so I have to do interviews without accommodations. That doesn't sound like a fun situation. It shouldn't even be hard for another janitor job. Listen, Alive, you're certainly able to string a coherent thought together, so I don't think it's that much of an issue in reality. Now, convincing somebody of this is a different thing. There's the reality of like what your value is and how qualified you are, and then your ability to persuade somebody that you are indeed like very capable, very valuable person. This is where the people skills and stuff and the soft skills come in, right? And a lot of people complain that there's a disconnect between like, look, the reality is I have a lot of skills, but the problem is I can't convince people of this when in like a 45-minute job interview, I don't make a great first impression. So that's where the soft skills come in, so
Yes.
So learn that and consider the world of that we were talking about earlier, networking. If you can talk to people one-on-one, and they're open, they give you a fair chance. It's a little bit different than when you come into a job interview and they've already talked to like 10 people and they're putting you all, they're very skeptical of everything you say and, all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
A little bit of a different thing. So that might be the solution to just go outside the job interviewing thing, go into the world of networking, informational interviews, that kind of stuff. And maybe it'll work better.
Yeah. And in many cases, you also have to advocate for yourself. So if you believe that without your medication, you cannot perform and do the jobs, then that seems like that's a conversation for you to have with your provider who's prescribing you your medication to see if they might be able to connect you with resources to find some accommodations. So that's like the first step is advocate for yourself to get those accommodations if you truly believe you need them. Now, if there's some sort of discussion and it's determined that you don't need those accommodations, then maybe it is nerves. Maybe it is, lack of preparation. Maybe it is trying to look for jobs that actually aren't the best fit for you. So there's a lot of other pieces to that. again, you have to advocate for yourself. If you believe that you are qualified for a certain job, then maybe you need to work with someone who's a career specialist through your workforce center, if you're in the United States, or a career coach like me, who can help you really identify the job that's probably the best fit for you, the type of industry that might be a good fit for you, and then also come up with a really tangible strategy to apply for an interview for jobs so that you feel prepared and that you're going to go in with a successful experience, even if you don't get the job. Because again, it's a numbers game. Even having networking in your corner, it's still a numbers game. You can't just expect to apply to a single job or talk to a single person and get hired right away. So it's going to be a process. And step one is being able to advocate for yourself.
Absolutely. And when we say numbers game, we mean like Abby said, you try a thing. Maybe it works for some person. It doesn't work for someone else. You get a very negative reaction from someone else, but then you do the same thing, but you go to a different person, then you get a much more positive response. Mm-hmm. That's what we mean by numbers game. You can't just like try it once and then give up. Or, I applied to 3 jobs. I didn't get an interview, so I just gave up. It's like, no. Hello to Portable Airline. Hello to, how do you say that? Jung's Dro? Yeah, you guys are awesome. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Portable Airline says, I'm not currently looking for a job. I'm in college, but I really love the way you talk, so I'm tuning in. Well, thank you very much. You've obviously got impeccable taste.
Great.
I didn't know you had such good taste. Lydia, right? That's where we are. I have been a stay-at-home mom / caregiver. I haven't worked for 18 years. I'm 58 now. I would like to work again. Do I just use my caregiving skills to fill in the gap in my resume? You could do that, but I encourage you to try the networking thing. Okay, learn all you can about networking. And like I said earlier, I don't care if you know nobody. I don't care if you're an introvert. It will be more promising to do it that way. Recruiters.
And if you have been a stay-at-home mom and caregiver for the last 18 years, the chances of you never leaving your home and never interacting with anyone else over those last 18 years is slim. I'm not saying it's impossible. You certainly could never leave your home after those 18 years, but you probably have some sort of community, whether it's your church or a group that you volunteered for, or if you sent your children to school, maybe it's some sort of groups at school or programs that your kids volunteered with. So start there. Look at the immediate people that you already have a community with, that you have relationship with. You'll likely find that those people would be willing to advocate for you and put in a good word for you at their current employer, or maybe they know someone who knows someone and can make some.
Yeah, somebody's husband or somebody's wife or whatever. Yep. They work here. Ask if is there any opportunities there? Could you use someone that can do this? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. And now the one thing that I have found when it comes to people who have large gaps in formal employment is they become their own worst enemy, because they start to do what we talked about at the very beginning of this live stream, which is they put this disclaimer like, well, I haven't worked for 18 years. Well, if you were a stay-at-home mom and a caregiver, you probably have exceptional time management and project management skills. You just have to be able to describe it in a certain way to convince the interviewer or the recruiter or the hiring manager, whoever it is, that you are going to be able to start in this job and hit the ground running, and you're not going to need significant train-up period. The one area where you may be lacking is maybe in technology. So if you know that you're not comfortable using very common programs like Microsoft Word or Outlook or Google Docs or any of those things.
I refuse to use DOS.
Yes. You will want to go upskill, engage in some training on your own to learn how to use some of those programs that you could be asked to use on a regular basis that are thought to be kind of universal in the workforce. So watch some YouTube videos. Maybe you can attend a training session at your local community center, whether it's through a rec center, community center, workforce center, something like that, to get a handle on where the state of technology is moving into a new job. At the same time, if you were a stay-at-home mom, maybe you have kids who are super technologically savvy and you stayed on top of it and you don't have to do that sort of thing. But that's the one thing that I'm thinking of. If I were to be a stay-at-home mom, I feel like I might lose touch on the industry standards for recruiting in HR because I'm not doing it every single day. So I might then choose to take a certification class or sit in and audit a university course in HR to just refresh my skills so that I'm not starting at a disadvantage when I'm applying to jobs.
Yeah, and being a homemaker slash caregiver, it is a full-time job, and it does
Oh,
require
sure.
a hell of a lot of skills. And whether or not some of these clowns out in the real world understand that or not is not your issue. I agree with Abby. Don't put disclaimers on like what you're doing. Say, I've been at home, as if it's like a negative thing.
Yeah.
You probably have qualities that a lot of people in regular like day jobs that pay money, because you're working from some organization, they wish they had.
They could
They wish
only
they had
dream
that
of
kind of
having those
patience.
skills.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's very valuable. It can be perceived as very valuable if you deal with people that understand these things. You know what I mean? So the other thing is that when you're doing networking and you're reaching out to these people, you're demonstrating your capabilities. So if you approach them and it's very professional, it's very articulate, it's very persuasive. It's like you're giving a free sample of like what your capabilities are. It speaks for itself. It's not about like I'm talking about what I can do. I'm showing you this is what it's like. This is a free sample of what it's like to deal with me.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
there's always that.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up before we gotta really end this. So Amaze says, from my experience, I usually say I'm familiar with the tools and being certified is a plus, even if I haven't used it extensively. And it often serves me well as long as I show reasonable enthusiasm.
Yeah.
That doesn't strike me as surprising. Great response, Bill. Some of those tools are yes. And Alive is saying maybe it's nerves. Great on paper, but all of a sudden, this is obscured. I can't read the last part, but that's silly. I've got like a. Oh, there we go. Okay, it just freed up. It's some weird thing on the interface here. Great on paper, but all of a sudden can't talk right.
Go back to the beginning of our stream and watch all about mock interviews.
Yeah, work on it. Work on it. It's amazing what you can do when you've rehearsed properly over a little while. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It is amazing. So I understand we might not be privy to all the details, but at the same time, go and actively work on this stuff. And over time, you will see noticeable change. Nicola, thank you for answering my questions. I'm a bit behind on the video. No problem, Nicola. Thanks for being here. I'm applying to roles in a new industry mostly. The most recent interview I had was rejected due to location. Well, that's an understandable thing that hopefully shouldn't affect your morale at all. I live too far away, but they said I was a great fit. AI is probably an excuse for some of my applications. I think another issue is the field I am applying for compared to my work experience. It could well be, yes. But what we said earlier still stands.
Yes, and I think I have a video, but I've gotten kicked out of my YouTube studio, so I'm not able to search it right now, but I'm going to try to put it in the chat in just a moment when it comes to switching industries, because really what you want to focus on is your transferable skills. You probably have the skills to be successful in many different industries. It's just how do you frame your previous experience for this new industry in a way that communicates that even though you might not have the exact job titles or the exact experience in organizations that are in the same industry, you still have the ability to be successful in the role. So I'm going to try to find that video. Working on it now.
I don't think we have time to cover everything, unfortunately, today, because we really have to end this. Unfortunately, we're over time on this. But I want to thank Nicola. I want to thank Alive and the people that we didn't get to, Dell, Ivan, and Amazed, and Just Lydia. Just Lydia says, thank you very much. You're absolutely welcome, Just Lydia. We will be back in 2 weeks from today, same time, to do this again. So if you do want to talk to both of us together, if you could come back then. Otherwise, I do live streams like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And Abby, I don't think you do live streams that much, but
not
they can still reach you.
Yep.
So you respond to comments and things.
Yep. I try to post weekly. Try being the the common one.
Mm.
I've been exercising my life-work balance recently, focusing more on the life side of things than the work side of things. But Bill and I do live stream together like this at least every other week. So if you are watching from my channel, tune in not next week, but the week after. And if you watch Bill's channel, he's going to be here. He live streams a lot.
Yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment, and like a lot of people, if you're looking for someone to help you, someone in your court that's like got your back, that's going to help you improve yourself, improve your performance in job interviews and things like this, or if you're having issues with not even job interviews, but just getting callbacks for applications and stuff, check out some of Abby's services. You do career coaching.
Yep.
Go to her channel. Check out some of the stuff she has there. Even as I understand it, even like one mock interview with Abby, you can get some real feedback.
Yep.
And this kind of thing that can point you in the right direction. So check out all that stuff. I have courses, etc. on my channel. If you're watching this on my channel, you can see them in the description box below. And we will be back in 2 weeks. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Okay, take care.